Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, adepts, friends, fans, family, and followers to Season 4, Episode 6 of the hit underground occult radio show known as Knights of the Nephilim, brought to you by Celestial Oddities Radio and the Coterie of Samil Arcane Occult Order. As always, I will be your host and guide on this obscure and mysterious journey into magic and mysticism, darkness and divination. I'm Reverend Frater Crow, and it's a pleasure to have you listening in this evening. Whether you're listening live, streaming after the fact, or you've downloaded this to your device for on the go, I do want to thank you for your patronage and support. Just please make sure you click the like, share, and follow button on whatever platform you're tuning in from, whether it be iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google, Amazon, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We air across everywhere, so jump in wherever you feel is appropriate for you, but by clicking the like, share, and follow buttons, it moves us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, keeps you in the loop with new episodes as they air, and gives you unfiltered access to our past archives of not only this show, Knights of the Nephilim, based upon esoteric science, occult doctrine, and ritual magic, or it be one of our other shows like Celestial Oddities, The Pong, Pair of Normal Guys podcast, based on paranormal and supernatural phenomena, interviewing professionals within the field, taking on phone calls from people like you around the world to hear your strange and extraordinary stories of the unexplained, or be one of our last shows, which is Uncovering the Underground, where we talk with and interview artists from music to modeling, stars of the big screen, comedy, oddities, and everything in between. So make sure you check out all of our past episodes. We have over 150 episodes out between the three shows, a lot more on the way. We are proud to be back with Season 4 of Knights of the Nephilim, and that's where you're at with us this evening. So make sure you stick around and check out our past guests we've had on. Tonight will certainly be another great episode. Before we jump into that, we want to thank our sponsors, Arsenosis, Aragni Arcane Services, Belladonna's Botanicals, The Telemancer, Goetic Impressions, Limitless Liberations, and Little Shop of Lilith. That's a mouthful. We'll be stopping throughout this evening to let you hear a little bit about these companies, where you can check them out, if they're running any specials, and give you an opportunity to maybe pick something up for yourself and for your temple. All right, so this evening we got Chaweon Koo, and she is an author of an amazing book, which I will talk about this evening, but I'm very impressed with her book as far as the beauty of it. It's up there, and I'm a person who collects books, so it's very nice. She is also the operator of Witches and Wine on YouTube, and it's a great podcast where she also interviews occultists and talks with them from all different backgrounds and walks of life, and she has some very great content. We're going to be talking a little bit about that this evening as well. So, as always, grab your ritual athames and put on your ceremonial attire, light your candles and focus your desires. Step into the circle and intone the sacred names, give offering and praise as we stare into the flames and summon the spirit that is Chaweon Koo. All right, guys, we are live here on Knights of the Nephilim podcast, and we are with Chaweon Koo, the author of Spellbound, which is a fantastic book. She is also the host and operator of Witches and Wine on YouTube, which is a phenomenal podcast. So we're very excited to have you on the show this evening. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. And by the way, the stream will start shortly thing was very trippy.
So. Oh yeah, it is a little tripped out with the geometric figures and kind of the weird acidy background. Absolutely. We like to expand our mind on this show, go deep into the pits of psyche.
Vibes. I like it.
So thank you once again for coming on. I mean, I'm very impressed with your book. It's kind of funny. I'll tell the listeners out there. This was a fan suggestion. I think last season, at the beginning of the season, someone had emailed me and said, listen, I have someone you have to bring on your show. She's amazing. Her book is phenomenal, and I want you to check her out. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And at first I thought it was someone who worked with you. I was like, oh, are you like her manager? Are you something? No. She's like, no, I'm just a fan of her work, and I really think you should check her out. So as I pulled up your page and started watching your videos, I'm like, she looks so familiar to me. And then I came across one that had, like I said earlier to you briefly, you had mentioned Jason Miller, who is someone I've taken his courses in the past, love him as an author and as a magician, as you do as well. And I'm like, wait a second, and I scrolled back and found that interview. So it's funny, I first came across your work quite a while ago, 5-6 years ago, and I like to always start off my shows traditionally and ask, where did you get started? Because obviously you've been putting out material for a little bit of time now. Where did your path on esotericism and occultism start?
So I detail a lot of it in my book, Spellbound. By the way, this is my book, and it's hardcover only. People keep asking me, is there an ebook? There is no ebook.
I love that.
Yeah, purposely it was created almost as a magical talisman. So I tell people, don't tell my publisher, but if you don't have money, just go to Barnes & Noble, touch the book, go through it yourself, but just touch it, and that'll be kind of...
get your hands on it. I was fortunate enough to actually look through it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. See, my problem is I have a list that if I try the rest of my life, I'm probably never going to complete. I read about 50 books a year, and I just can't get through them. I have a library where I grab 5 or 6 and keep them on my nightstand and read them at the same time. Now, a friend of mine had your book, so it worked out good whenever I was talking about getting you on the show. I wanted to get my hands on it, and I looked through it, and it's beautifully done. I mean, I'm someone who collects rare edition of occult books, and this one isn't rare. You can go get it quite easily, folks, and it belongs amongst the best of them as far as beauty. It's a very nice book.
Thank you. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to include in the book was not just the story of my journey as being a witch and occultist, but, art, culture, those are all magic to me as well. A very influential book that I read when I was starting out in magic was Sophie, Lionel Snell. And in the beginning part of my book, I actually talk about, there's a grid that he has in that book that says religion, science, art, and magic, and how there's a spectrum of how things are. And so for me, it was very important that I describe my journey both in a visual way, maybe hopefully in the future there'll be some sort of audiobook, and also to write about it as well, text, as in like spelling of, the spell of my magic journey. And so my magic journey began kind of comically, I would say. I like to tell the story with sort of like a wink-wink sort of attitude, but what happened was I was really broke about 5 or 6 years ago, super broke. We're talking like I was ready to be homeless broke. I was unemployed. I was on unemployment. I lived above a bar in the Lower East Side, or even the East Village of New York City. So I was just there all the time, right? Just drinking my woes away. And I was like, wow, I'm this close to being homeless. So what are my options right now? And I thought, okay, well, I don't want to, but I'll go to Korea because you can teach English in Korea. They give you a flight there, and they give you a place to stay. I don't have many options, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. Now, I am ethnically Korean, but I hadn't been back to Korea since the early 2000s, since like Japan and Korea did the like World Cup. They hosted it like jointly back in the early 2000s. That was the last time I was there. So I go to Korea. As soon as I land, I was like, something's different. And within a month of being in Korea, I had a coworker, a Korean or a Koko, somebody who was raised in Korea as well as ethnic Korean, asked me just randomly, somebody she barely knows, she was like, hey, my family and I, we're going to go see a mudang, which is a Korean shaman, at this like little tiny village an hour outside of Seoul, the capital of South Korea. Do you want to come with us? Why she asked me, I'm not sure. Again, she barely knew.
It is interesting.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, let's do it. I go there, and from that point on, I was like, there's something about this. And you have to understand, for almost all the years leading up to it, I was like a closet interested in the occult, but outwardly I was very much like, I'm a dogmatic atheist, this is superstition. and still I identify as an atheist, which, by the way, is a singular issue. It's not a global perspective. Being an atheist means that you could believe in witchcraft, but also believe that there is no God. You could even believe that the earth is flat, and you could also be like, oh, but there's no God.
Yeah, it's not limited.
It's just a singular issue. And for me, I still don't believe in spirits, and yet there was some sort of zeitgeist, there was some sort of whatever it was of the homeland that kind of decided with its invisible hands and fingers, very Adam Smith-like, Wealth of Nations, that invisible hand just being like, instead of the economy, we're just going to witchcraft. And that's basically where it started. And then, of course, I met 3 guys on Tinder who just were complete and utter, just complete fuckboys. But they were very important. I have to give them credit. I've written about it before. Because sometimes when you're in these situations where, first of all, you're in a country where you don't necessarily want to be, right? And also, you're with these guys where it's a very toxic situation, and you're just at a point where you're like, usually where if I were with my family, if I were with my friends, my home country, I would feel comfortable, but I'm completely adrift right now. And I thought, okay, Susan at the yoga studios back home in New York City, she seemed pretty happy. And what did she do? She did really woo stuff. So I have nothing to lose because I am just suffering here. And then I just started off doing very, I'm going to say the woo stuff, but that was the in to the more deeper witchcraft stuff that I would eventually do.
That's awesome, though, that, something so unexpected that you're not even quite sure why you were asked along ended up being a moment that changed your life going forward, mentally, spiritually. And as you said, has probably changed everything since, because that's a big part of who you are now, which at that point was just the doorway opening. So that's really fantastic.
Yeah, that just shows you that you just don't know. All the things in your life, they kind of build up to when you look back at it. And I think it was Steve Jobs who said it in one of the commencement speeches before he passed away, about you can only connect the dots when you look backwards.
And I put up a post about that this morning, a quote, and it says that we live life going forward but can only understand it backwards. Yeah, it is an awesome perspective to think about, because you do only really see it in hindsight. So as you look backwards, and you're like, wow, that moment at the time might not even have seemed that important. But looking back on it now, I understand how important it truly was to everything else.
Right. Looking back on it, it makes me wonder just this illusion of being in control. And I know there's a big debate in magic about how much agency do we have in terms of utilizing magic to shape our future. And sometimes I am in the camp of 100%, you are an agent of completely 100% shaping what it is that you want via magic. But at the same time, there's a part of me that wonders, but is that an illusion? Because sometimes the way things unfold, I'm just I don't know, it seems very clunky to try to say that it's 100%. Absolutely, you are in control. That seems like a very postmodern or even modern way of man versus nature, man always overtaking nature, versus maybe there's a fluidity in this. And so now, after doing magic very deeply and intensely for the past 6 years, I'm starting to fall a little bit more in the camp of, I think that there are times when you're not as in control as you think you are, and that the magic that you do to try to get a sense of control, which is what I used to do magic exclusively for, control freak. But now it's less about that and more about surrendering the control, and instead surrendering into who I think that I am. So it's no longer trying to control the external world. It's more about surrendering into my internal world, which is a very different perspective.
Well, I think that, and you had said it, it's almost like you're on a train. You're continuously in motion. It's not stopping. You can't change it to go backwards. But what you do have options to do with magic is to pull that lever and switch which track it goes on as it goes. And they all slightly go to the same place, just a little bit of a difference. And I think that's how I've always looked at magic myself is, I don't have full control. I am a small part. I'm a sailboat, and I can sometimes bring wind to push me a different direction, but I'm still on the water either way. We don't control the water. We can maybe just control the wind, that small fraction of it. And that's how I've kind of looked at it. And that's because you've said it even in one of your old shows that, that it's it's not something you're looking for riches and looking for anything like that. You're asking it to change and enlighten your mind state and vibration. So by raising that, you can kind of have that pilot seat and govern it a little bit, but it's only one couple pegs up above where you're at now. You don't have godhood control that people want to think you have. It, it's just not there.
That's the great irony of magic, I've realized, especially ceremonial magic. In ceremonial magic, at least the way that I do it, I am doing it with the intention, I call it Churchill energy. Okay. The demons whoever, they serve at my pleasure. I am like, Adonai in the ritual. I am also Adonai. But at the same time, as soon as I leave the ritual, I always go back to the default, which is I'm actually not in as control as I think that I am.
Correct, and that's how it is too. Yeah, you have to be in control within the ritual setting. But yeah, in life, it'll continue to raise that frequency, and you'll start to live a little bit differently. It will change you, but you don't have that Adonai godhood in most facets of life. But in the ritual center and circle, you do, and I think that's a beautiful thing, the give and take of both sides.
But that's where I think a lot of maybe beginner occultists, they mess it up. They get caught up in this thing where they just become so entrenched in the idea of like, I'm in control and I'm going to take that attitude of like, I'm the center of the universe, I'm the center of the Kabbalistic cross, and I'm going to take it outside of the ritual and I'm going to be like that 24/7, which is complete and utter like asshole behavior, an ungrounded behavior, to be perfectly honest.
Well, and a lot of people have that in the occult. You nailed that on the head. There's a lot of people you talk to that come with that God complex, and you're like, I don't care how powerful you are in your own dimension of reality while doing magic. Once you mix that with 2,000, 3,000 other people around you, it doesn't matter. Like, it's that's only a small part of your reality, not theirs. And I think people lose that. And Israel Regardie talked about people when they start magic, especially ceremonial magic, after a short time when they start to have their real successes, should always have a psychoanalysis done on themselves to make sure that they're not going crazy. Because how many people have completely lost themselves in that God complex to a very high level after they start summoning spirits? You know what I mean? And they think that, oh my God, I summoned a spirit and it listened to me and I controlled it, that I'm a god. And you are in your own way. I mean, that's one thing we can say, we're all aiming to be God, but some people let that kind of go a little bit too far. Interesting thing, behind you, there was an orb that flew down across the ceiling, flew down next to your side, and then went off the screen. It was very interesting.
That's cool.
You'll have to look that back on the replay at some point.
That's super cool.
Let's read some of these comments here. We got good evening, hello paranormal people. Merrick says he has your book and he loves it. Yeah, Merrick, it's a beautiful book. Like I said, I will be picking it up. It's just one of those things because I'm like, fuck, I want to read it, but I'm like, when can I read it? I can't get through the stack that I have, folks. That's my one vice in life. There's a lot of things I can quit and not do. Books are my downfall, guys. Throw books in front of me, I'll jump in your vehicle, you could kidnap me. I told you as kids, don't go after the candy. Me, it was books. Get in the car, kid. I got books. I'm like, fuck, count me in.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, this is the reason why hopefully one day I can have my book be an Audible book, because that's one of the great joys of my life, to get ready in the morning and listen to an audio book.
It's nice.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll just purposely extend my getting ready in the morning time. And I read a lot, or should I say I listen to a lot of fiction. Okay. And especially, the reason why I like to listen to fiction books, even though I spend a lot of time pondering and in the world of the occult and witchcraft, is again that spectrum of like art, magic, science, religion, and always remembering that art and culture is as transformative as magic. We may not use the term magic.
Oh, it's still magic.
Yeah, but it is absolutely magic. I mean, propaganda, if you really think about it, that is one of the most incredible forms of magic there is, to literally have masses of people change their mind and do what it is that you want them to do. Marketing is social media.
It's powerful. Magic. Very powerful.
Super powerful.
It's interesting to think about when you get a crowd together, and it sounds like it'd be opposite. But being able to use that manipulative, that propaganda magic, being able to use that on a manipulative level to control a crowd is actually easier the more people you have in that crowd. And it doesn't seem to make sense, but people never turn more animal than they do when you throw them around a shit ton of other people. When they're centered out with one or two friends or three or four friends or by themselves, they're still generally reserved. But you gather large masses of people and put them together, and they start to distribute and portray very animal-like behavior. Look at concerts and like Woodstock and things like that, where you have very malicious crimes happening and a ton of drug use, and you have people destroying property everywhere you can look, burning porta potties, smashing stages. People turn into animals when there's a bunch of them together. So that is a very powerful form of magic, that if you can find ways to sway the winds of favor and can control crowds like that, you become unstoppable. And these global corporations have done that through marketing and through their campaigns on a subliminal level that people watch every day and get entrenched in, and they have no idea they're even falling victim to a very, very potent form of magic. They just say that's a real thing. Well, so is magic, folks. It's just how you look at magic. That is very much magic.
Well, 100%. There is a section in my book where I talk about how K-pop basically is doing magic on a global scale, and they don't call it magic. And yet, how is it that within about 25 years, we have a country that is, the population is like, what, 30 million or so? And if you look at Gen Z and younger, Korean pop culture is just international Gen Z and younger culture. You have American kids going to BTS concerts. And BTS is the best-selling boy band or just group in music history after the Beatles. And they sing in Korean. They're from Korea. They sing in Korean. And it's not just them. New Jeans right now, I think it's the number one band on the Billboard 200 in America. And it's like, how did that happen? How did that happen?
In a short amount of time.
I reverse engineered, or what I hope is reverse engineering, on how I think a small country that is trying to build a juggernaut when they don't really do anything in English, how they did it. Like New Jeans, they just performed at Lollapalooza, for example. It's like, how did that happen, right? And comparing them to like J-pop and seeing like the difference. And what I realized was that K-pop incorporated the theater, the technology of the occult without even knowing it. They realized that what they had to do, and there's an entire section in my book that talks about the theater of magic, the performance of magic. So much of what is magical is basically, drawing the magic circle, that used to be a dance.
Yep.
And now when people do it, it feels magical. It feels spooky. When people are doing the LBRP, a lot of it is because it just feels magical. This does not feel like you making pancakes on Sunday morning.
No, it's a magical dance. You're in it, and that's a great way of saying it. Golden Dawn magic. That's how I looked at that. Is when you would do Golden Dawn practices, the moving of the wand and creating the stars in the LBRP or the LBRH. And the movements and the intoning of the voice and the robes and everything had such a play to it, and I love that. I love this choreographed moment of magic because you're bringing art, as you said, with magic, with philosophy, with everything. It's just a giant package, and you're doing it as a dance, and that dance just happens to wield personal power.
Exactly, and that's exactly what K-pop does. It uses the stage as its magic circle, and within the 3 minutes or so that they're performing, the laws of physics cease to exist. Time and space have been suspended, and instead what they bring is magical fantasy through basically aesthetics, through pyrotechnical things, through great stage production, through incredible choreography, through all the, it's a visual, audio, just bonanza. And they do it, and they basically brainwash you. And they brainwash the entire world, and the thing is, in Africa, in the Middle East, in India, in South America, in Europe, Russia, in America, K-pop is one of the dominant Gen Z sort of like cultural everything, which shocked me. It shocked me. It's like, why Korea? Why not Japan? And one of the things that Japan did not do, because Japan was, I think, a little bit unmagical in their thinking. and they were too business, right? Korea was like, we just want to put it out there through this medium called YouTube. South Korea is a trendsetter and a pioneer when it comes to things like high-speed internet. The entire government was like, we're going to invest in high-speed government for like 98% of the country. And so from the time of YouTube, they dominated. And so while they were doing that and therefore had like first-person advantages, Japan was like, no, we're going to put in a lot of copyright laws because we're afraid of people from a business standpoint, very unmagical standpoint. Like, we don't want people to copy this. Whereas K-pop was like, we want people to copy this. We want to become viral. We want to become memes. We want to infiltrate everything. We want everything. We want to be the propaganda, the flyers that were like thrown out of the planes that just sprinkled down on Berlin saying how the German government like sucks. We want to be like that. We're not trying to control the narrative. We're instead trying to let it take root very organically, which I think is one of the things that we have to accept when we're doing magic. We can't control where it goes. So in a way, the more you surrender, which again is part of the irony, the more you surrender to the fact that I can't control magic. I can't control the waves. I can't control weather. I can't control nature. I can't control volcanoes. But the more I accept that I can't control it, the more that I get what it is I wanted to begin.
That's one of the most important, I think, truths in magic that a lot of people don't realize for a while is you've kind of said it in different words. You can't control the narrative. You have to be the narrative. You know, once you give up that control, that's when it happens. And it, like you said, it does sound ironic because you're giving up power. So once I give up my power, I find my power. But I think it's because of expectancy. We are trained since birth to expect things, and we have just, it's human nature to expect, and it's only in ritual I notice whenever you don't expect and you let be, you're still very much in control, but at the same time giving up that control and letting it be, not thinking so much about it. It seems to shape itself, often in the better.
You know, I often say that it's the little church ladies who are praying for you that I'm the most scared of. You know, because they will get on their knees and say, Jesus, take the wheel. I surrender to God. That's scary. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And because they are on their knees surrendering to God, praying to God, completely just like, use me, God. At that point, it's almost as if their will becomes conjoined with the will of the universe, the will of whoever, whatever you want to call it. And then suddenly they are the universe, and woof, it just comes in. And that's when I've seen things that might be called miracles, or seen magical results where I'm just like, I don't know how to explain it. And that's when I see it happen. Not when somebody's like very meticulous and controlled and stuff, but it's when people are sort of wild and in complete surrender that I see that happen.
Well, no, it's like, I mean, if you go back and you had mentioned, you know, ladies getting down on their knees and praying, if you think of Jesus, the story of Jesus, I mean, he wasn't very meticulous. It was at just strange times that someone would come forward, you know, and he'd say, okay, I'll heal you, and he'd heal them, but he did it very, you know, not organized. It was just a spur of the moment healing. And that's how often miracles do happen, is it's not going to be how you think it's going to happen, but we can perform miracles. I've seen some pretty radical stuff as well, and it's not from who you'd think. Like you said, it's not necessarily the person who's in robes. It's the person who you didn't think even does magic, and somehow is tuned in to a level that others aren't. I don't know, but it is very interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, it's the people baking apple pies, you know, who are sometimes the scariest witches. They'll never call themselves a witch, and that made me realize that, you know, there's vocabulary that we use to describe certain things, but the fundamental concept is the same. So this is one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan recently of certain psychology modalities. Like there's this one called internal family systems, IFS, which is kind of fashionable right now because it meshes really well with psychedelics and plant medicine. And of course, we all know psychedelics are having a just boom or renaissance.
Renaissance, absolutely.
Yeah.
Explosion.
Which, by the way, plant medicine was always a part of magic. So
absolutely,
it's sort of
from the beginning.
Of that, right? But so it's IFS, which is a very magical system, like literally, they are more or less telling you as part of this modality, and by the way, it was created by this guy named Dr. Dick Schwartz. He's a Harvard guy, 40 years evidence-based psychology. Part of the psychology modality is you give up your burdens to the elements. You literally do a ritual where you give it up to light, earth, air, whatever. And I'm like, wait a second, is this like a Wiccan thing, or is this like psychology? It's psychology. And he goes on podcasts and he just straight up says, Harvard guy again, he just straight up says, yeah, like sometimes there's these spirits. Like, I don't even know what they are, but they're not psychology. They're not parts of you. They're literal spirits. So I don't know. And he's just like, yeah, totally accepts it. And I'm like, wow. So it's almost as if science has started to reclaim our ancestral wisdom, the deep mysteries our ancestors said. And that's probably one of the reasons why I had to be back in my motherland in Korea to be initiated into magic, because I needed that ancestral push. And so I'm a huge fan of starting off with ancestral magic if you're a beginner witch, because of my experience in that.
Well, I think it has a lot of potency to start out in your culture, because if you start out in a different way and find it later on, it's not going to hit or impact the same as you saying, I started out in my grassroots of my home, and that's where it happened for me, and I hadn't even lived there for a while. I had to come back to find it, and it makes for just a really magical story in itself that you traveled back home and then discovered a huge part of who you are. I love that.
The story that I tell is that I started I just spoke about how Korea, they basically pioneered the entire concept of mukbangs, which is like you eat a whole lot of food when you're on a YouTube video, right? Mm-hmm. They started that. And I started Witches and Wine as a mukbang channel. It was never meant to be like a witchcraft channel. It was me and my friend going to buffet restaurants in Seoul, Korea, and just eating a shit ton of food. But then I was talking about magic and witchcraft. And I realized that I was having problems because I never meant or wanted to be in front of the camera. It was more like, why not do it? Why not try it? Because everybody's doing it in Korea. If I were back in America, I would have never done it because it wasn't a popular thing back then. So I was like, but I feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. So I was like, I should do a banishing spell. I should go to a cemetery and do a banishing spell and banish this entire I don't want to be seen thing for my mukbang channel, for my eating channel. So I look up, what is a public cemetery in Seoul, Korea, because I don't want to get kicked out or arrested in the middle of the night, right? I find a public cemetery that's next to, and it's part of a park, Mangguri Park. And I was like, and it's in Mangguri Mountain, because Korea is just filled with like low mountains. And so at midnight, I go there. I take a bus, I go there, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to die because there's a fucking scary, spooky-ass path leading to the mountain. Nobody's there. I go, spooky. It's like something out of that, music video Michael Jackson did, Thriller. Mm-hmm. The clouds are over the moon and everything. And I'm like, kind of like, doing my banishing spell, like freaking out, like literally freaking out. And then it was so cinematic. The clouds parted and this moonlight just beamed down on this field in front of me. And the field was filled with these graves. And in Asia, they don't have headstones. Instead, back in the old day, they would just dump a body on the ground and they put mounds of dirt on top, so you just see bumps, like life-size bumps, a field full of them. And the thing is that I remembered that this park, it houses the bodies of the freedom fighters of Korea. So the thing is that for much of Korean modern history, we were colonized by the Japanese. We didn't want to be colonized, obviously. The Japanese came in, destroyed our culture, tried to erase our identity, tried to breed the Koreanness out of us, made us take Japanese names. We couldn't speak Korean in the school system. It was horrible. Like, they had sex slaves that they took from, as Korean women, they were taken. It was a horrible thing. And Japanese citizens who were against the colonization, they were taken away in the middle of the night by the Japanese version of like the Gestapo. So it was like a bad thing back then. And so these were the people, the freedom fighters, who had literally died. There's a little prison in Seoul where they would torture people. It's almost like when I see movies of the Irish Republican Army and stuff, the IRA, that whole thing. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like that. Like, people were being tortured and everything. And there were freedom fighters who were just like, we will do anything to get the Japanese out. And these were the bodies of the people who had died been tortured, some of them so horribly, right? Like ridiculously, horribly, awfully. And I realized they died so that I could be free, literally so that I could be free. And then at that point, I realized my banishing spell was no longer about me trying to be seen because I wanted to eat a lot of food. It was me being seen because there weren't that many English-speaking Asian witchy types that were seen. Like, I can't really think of many when I first started. And at that point, suddenly the banishing spell took on a whole new epic feeling. It was no longer just about the small thing. It was something bigger. And then my hand stopped shaking, and it was as if there was an invisible hand from the universe that said, from the ancestors, we're going to help you. We're going to help you. No worries about it. We got you. So I did the banishing spell, turned around, walked away, didn't look back. And who I was when I left that banishing spell, when I left that public cemetery filled with the bodies of freedom fighters, was a very different person than who I was when I walked in. And I would say that kind of began the real sort of like journey into me developing Witches and Wine as an occult channel. Because before that, you can look back. I've kept all those old videos where I'm just eating food. Go back to number 1.
I've seen some with you and your girlfriend sitting in restaurants before. I think I only ever watched a couple minutes of those ones, but I had seen them on there, so that's funny. Yeah, that is the beginning.
And I never had the agenda of like having an occult podcast or anything, right? So the thing is that the whole reason why Jason Miller, who was kind of like the big occult guest that I had for the first time, the reason why he came on my channel, my barely had like 400 subscribers at the time channel, was first of all, Jason is just a cool person.
Yeah, he's a real
I'm
cool
very
dude.
supportive of young occultists, but also because at the time, very coincidentally, in his Strategic Sorcery Facebook group, he said, let's do like a blog hop. And this time, like this month or this year, it's going to be about financial magic. And I had just done a financial magic spell on a roller coaster. I'd written a sigil. I had empowered it going down the 4th largest wooden roller coaster in the world, which happened to be in South Korea. And so I was just like, ooh, I can do this. I'm a new witch, but I can do this. And I was the only one who didn't have like a written blog, and instead I was the only one who had a video blog.
That's
and
cool.
Because of that, I was like, okay, like Jason kind of like noticed it because, it was, at the time it was kind of like a, oh, okay, video. And so I worked up the guts to be like, okay, Jason, you kind of, singled me out and gave me a little extra attention and said, hey, it's kind of cool, And I was like, so if you think it's cool, would you mind coming on my very young YouTube channel? And he very graciously said yes. And if you see the first interview that I did with Jason, oh my God, I was so nervous. And I was just, you can definitely see a huge difference between who I was then and who I am now. So every single step of the way, like I had no agenda, nothing. I just literally thought I'm just going to do this and it'll be done. I had no idea that 6 years later, I would have a book. I'd be talking to you on a podcast, not as the interviewer, but as interviewee. I had no idea that my social media platforms would be where they are. I had no idea of any of this. And truly, I think back to the banishing spell that I did and that invisible hand of the ancestors and that feeling of, we got you. Don't worry about it. Just coming through and I'm like, it is too clunky and inelegant to just write it off as coincidence. Something happened. And the fact, I think even at that point that I decided I'm just surrendering. I don't even know what's going on. I'm confused. I'm surrendering. And just from that, again, I wasn't in control. And yet I ended up being more in control of my life now than I ever was because I gave up control. And I think that's kind of the theme of the magic that I do now. How to be in control without being in control.
And that's it. No, that's beautifully said because that is really it because you controlled yourself to go out there and do the ritual. You had as much control to go out there to put your mind, body, spirit where it needed to be.
Anybody can do that.
Anybody can do that. And, there was forces beyond that are that element that we can't control, that if we put ourselves out there and are open to it, it will receive us. And I do a lot of paranormal research and investigation aside from like my occult stuff. And I go all over the country and investigate places. And that's the biggest thing people tell me. when talking to the spirits of the dead, like how do you do it, or how do you get such good results? Be sincere. I don't care about cameras. You don't see me putting footage up or evidence. I go just with me and the groups that come out with me, and we sit down and we talk to the spirits, and we're open, and we can control our setting and how we are, but we have to open ourselves the same way to whatever is there, and oftentimes something happens. Something comes through. It's that element that we're not in control of, and that's what we interact with. So it's about being open, folks. If you're listening out there and you're wondering why sometimes maybe you're doing workings or you're practicing and you're not reaping the results, I've taught people this over time. You're closing yourself off either from trauma or from doubt. You have to let go. You can't. If you clutched on so tightly, how are you ever going to climb up the mountain? You're just going to hold on to the rock, never letting go until finally your hands give out and you fall. You're never going to make it to the top. It's one hand after another. You have to be open while still grounded. And a lot of people don't do that, unfortunately. It's like 101, witchcraft 101, so, but it's the things that people skip, because especially nowadays we have a world where everybody wants it and wants it quick. We do, and you kind of talk about moving into a modern paradigm, in your book, the little bit I was able to read. So it's, talking about witchcraft, as you said, traditionally to a modern age. How do you think that affects people nowadays? Because they, in history, it was few and far between to find a book, to be able to get yourself out there, to learn any of this. Now it's the click of a button, and it's so saturated that it's hard for people to know how to really venture into it and expect so much so early in the game. What are your thoughts on that?
I saw something very interesting the other day, which had nothing to do with magic. It had everything to do with social media commentary, which was that information is a commodity these days. You can go on Google, not saying it would be the best information, but you can find information, which will lead you to more information. These books that you could never find even like 30 years ago, they're being published now, and you can just buy it off Amazon Prime. So information is in a lot of ways a commodity. And instead of information, it's curation. It's the discernment of figuring out what is actually good information. What does good information look like? What is magic ritual really that's going to impact my life going to look like? Now that is where the human touch comes in, which is why when people freak out over AI, I'm just like, can you guys just please calm down, right? Like, AI is scary for those who are afraid of being seen as commodities, but there's something that AI can never replace, and that is this ability to have that mutative human intuition, where it's like, because AI needs to be built upon what came before, and then it tries to project on what they think the pattern is going to be the future. But human beings don't always follow patterns. Human beings, sometimes they zig left when AI and computers and algorithms say it should zig right, which is the reason why, whether it's trying to predict the cryptocurrency markets or the stock markets or the economy, every stock bro, which is so funny, they're like, I have the perfect formula I'm going to do. And they use all these like crazy graphics, and they're like using like and they're just like, yeah, I think that the price of Bitcoin is going to get here and there. They forget that the markets are people. Yep. They forget that financial markets, it's the Bitcoin, but who is actually doing the trading of the Bitcoin? It's people. It's impossible to predict via machine, simply because the algorithm just doesn't have that extra oomph that humans have. And that's what magic, I think, is really about. However, just because I'm not super worried about AI in that sense doesn't mean that I see AI as being useless. Quite the opposite. For me, modern technology in terms of like machines, AI, the metaverse, a blockchain, all that stuff, I'm like, hell yeah. Because what is the occult but technology? Literally, nobody came out of the womb wearing shoes, using paper, or doing a magic spell. These were all things to augment the human body and human experience. And the thing is, that's what we are. We're cyborgs. If you go look at TED Talks, they'll talk about how human beings, this is always in our back pocket. It's a type of wormhole. And the thing is that we're going to have implants soon that are going to be like easy passes for us. We may get implants in our eyes. We're going to augment our vision by maybe utilizing glasses where we can have an overlay of augmented reality. We already have that right now with the Apple glasses and stuff like that. So the thing is that it's like, okay, the occult is technology too. So this is just a different type of technology. How can we use that? How can we use that to augment what we already augmented ourselves with when it comes to the occult? And what I'm finding is that young people today, which is so exciting to me, for young people, they don't have the same sort of existential crisis when it comes to technology.
No, they've always had it.
Yeah, they grew up with this. To them, it's just sort of like, yeah, this is like not a big deal. You know, like, why are the boomers so afraid, right? So because of that, what I see is that they're very creative in how they utilize technology. And therefore, the way that they do witchcraft and the occult, very, very different. There is a resurgence in, first of all, chaos magic amongst young people, but also something that I like to, I don't have an official name for it yet, but so far I'm calling it Chaos Magic 2.0, but it's not Chaos Magic. It's only like Chaos Magic in that it takes away a lot of the pomp and circumstance. It really appreciates things like science and evidence-based things and is really concerned about just get the result. However, the practitioners, the young practitioners of this Chaos Magic 2.0, they're very different from the British dudes, you know, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. So their magic is going to be different because it has so much indigenous flavor to it. You know, they're going back to ancestral roots. But these young people are so interested, because it's so natural for them, to incorporate things like technology. And they're so open to it. And they're so open to mixing and matching all these things. It drives older occultists crazy. You know, a lot of purists are just like, what? You can't do that. And young people are just like, fuck off. You know, I will do it. I'm going to do it. And I find that
true.
Invigorating. I find that so invigorating to see. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if I'd do it that way. But the fact that they tried, the fact that their neuroplasticity allowed them to try it and they took the risk, I'm like, good for you. And I find myself so excited, which is why I'm no longer on Facebook that much anymore. And instead, I'm always on TikTok. And TikTok is my occult technology platform of choice these days. And by the way, TikTok is very, very occult. Very occult.
I've heard that. I've never actually been on it, to tell you the truth. I with Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and everything else I'm on, I kind of limit myself to any more than that. And by the time TikTok started getting big, everybody's like, Crow, you got to jump on there. And I'm like, no more. I can't do it. I'm like, and my thing is, I get enough reach with this show now. Like my goal was never to really make it huge or anything like that. So people are like, your show could be big on there. I'm like, no, that's the thing. I don't want it to be. Let it just reach the people it needs to. But I know that, as you just said, there's a lot of occultism on there, a lot of esotericism on there. And you're going to have the full spectrum from misinformation and bad to really great people teaching and helping the next generation. And you said about the new generation being willing to tell the old generation kind of fuck off, I'm doing it my way. And that is important. There are a lot of purists that will talk about ruining of the culture of magic, and I understand partially where they're coming from, but at the same time, magic is always in an evolutionary stage. And I'm a diabolist. That's what I've always practiced is you know, what some people refer to as Satanism, but it's not Satanism. Devil worship is working with the darker side of magic. It's always been my practice. And that's always been that way. Like, I followed Goetic guidelines for ceremonial magic and then eventually started removing some of those guidelines. And I understand why they're there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the left-hand path that just throw it to the side because they don't see a purpose for it or even understand it. God names and this and that, oh, no way. I understand the purpose and the mechanics of magic and respect them. But I did find out after time that I didn't need some of these things. And you do have a lot of purists that would say, well, you're not practicing real magic. Well, fuck off. I'm still getting the result that I need out of it. I still have a very sincere and dedicated practice. It works for me. I don't care if it's what the guy 500 years ago wrote about, because that guy 500 years ago was performing his own chaos magic at that time, if you think about it. He followed a structure that he was able to formulate ritual magic that now we look at it as being the purest form, but in his day, it was just the magic he created. So, you know, you have to, each generation, come up with your own way of doing things. And as you said, this new generation doesn't have that shift like we have, because there is that argument between the old ways and the new ways, whereas the new generation is just like, fuck the old ways, like, we're here, this is where we're at now, this is the next step. And it makes you think, what if this was the plan all along? I mean, we're constantly evolving, right? What if humans are able to create artificial intelligence and robotics to a form where, as you said, we start adding different chips into ourselves and we become cyborgs? And the whole point is we are spirit in flesh, in a very biomechanical suit, but we upgraded that biomechanical suit for more of a cyborg robotic suit. And consciousness is evolving to the point where people say that machines will take over the world. Well, what if we are the machines? What if our consciousness becomes the machines and we're just trading out skin for robotics? Because you think of AI, and I've had this on the show before, AI is very sentient in ways where it does have an intelligence to it. I mean, you can ask AI to write you a story and give it specifics, and in 30 seconds you have 25 pages of just marvelous writings, and that's terrifying. But that's also what is to come, and as you were saying, I could see that being the merger. For so long I looked at it as such a bad thing, and I started looking at it as, what if that's the next step of evolutionary phase for humanity, is we do become the robotics, so to speak.
I think that there is a very unconstructive strain of I'm going to just say like anti-technology, even though the occult is the technology as well, in the occult and witchcraft, because I think a lot of times, to be perfectly honest, and this might be a hot take, I think that a lot of people, they do witchcraft because they want the romantic, idealized rose-colored glasses of like past traditional times when life was a certain way. And to be perfectly honest, I see this sort of like, ooh, artificial and man-made bad, nature good. I see that actually as being rooted in misogyny and patriarchy, because the way that we see Mother Nature, the way that we see nature is the way that we see women. Because the thing is, nature itself is actually brutal. Nature fucks you up. Nature is not beautiful. Nature is bloody and harsh. But we see the curated forest, the park rangers taking the dead animals and the carcasses, removing it, and keeping away the predators from us. And we're like, yay, nature. Sort of like a virgin woman. There's this idealized version of this virginal woman, this untouched nature. She's great. But as soon as she has awareness, as soon as she has some experience, or if she's sullied in any way, if there are fingers that go in her, all of a sudden, she's broken. We don't want her. We want this virgin, which never existed, this pure thing that we can control and that we can treat like we're the sovereign of, right? And to me, I'm just like, throw up a little bit in my mouth, when I think about that, because what's so wrong about artifice? Because man made the artifice. It wasn't made in Mars. It wasn't made on the moon. It was made on Earth by man, who was part of nature. But why is it that when man makes it, it's considered boo, right? When what we're actually saying when we say, ooh, nature is so great and artifice is bad, what we're saying is the man-made curated version of nature that is so romanticized is what we like. But like blatant man-made stuff, without the cover of, oh, actually this is nature, just forget the fact that we had our hand in it, okay? That is considered bad. And I'm just like, hypocrites, right? And so for me, it's like, no. The occult, nobody came out of the womb doing occult. Nobody came out of the womb like doing any of this shit, okay? Nobody came out of the womb writing. Paper is a technology. Shoes are a technology. The wheel is a technology. The occult is a technology. And so you want to be against some technology, cherry pick, but not against other technologies? Give me a break, right? So for me, I'm just like, let's get rid of that binary. And instead, let's see, how does any technology, just like paper, help the occult spread? Thanks to paper, you got this. Yep. You got books. Okay, that's a technology. So how can we utilize more enduring technology for example, that's on the blockchain? Paper can be burned. It can fall apart after a couple hundred years. It's going to yellow, become brittle. But something on the blockchain may not have those same things. In fact, creating a talisman on the blockchain kind of is the same idea, the same first principles of why did we create talismans out of jewels, out of hard metals, out of stone? Because they were durable. Well, you know what's more durable than even stones and diamonds? Technology. The blockchain, you can carry it around in a chip in your back pocket, in a USB. You can go on a plane, go to another country. The U.S. government cannot fuck with whatever sort of technology is there because it's in a USB thing, which is one of the reasons why like cypherpunks who created this entire idea of blockchain stuff, that's what they were all about. And so I don't agree with Bitcoin maximalists or like super crypto bros and stuff like that when it comes to a lot of things. But I mean, when we're talking about the first principles of magic, which is let's create things that are durable and let's create things that can create mass adoption. Well, isn't that technology? Isn't that the internet? Isn't that YouTube? Isn't that TikTok? Isn't that memes? And if so, why are you standing in the way of the things that were utilized by occultists back in the day to do exactly that? People today who are coders, people today who are technologists, people today who are TikTok influencers, are they also not the modern version of the occultist of yore? To me, they absolutely are. Kim Kardashian is an underrated occultist. I'm not a fan of Kim Kardashian, but she is a witch and occultist. She has almost single-handedly, she and her clan have changed modern society for better or for worse. If somebody tells me that's not witchcraft and that's not occultism, I would have to really question, do you really understand what occultism and witchcraft really is?
Well, Anton LaVey wrote, aside from the Satanic Bible, wrote a book, I think it's The Satanic Witch, and the whole premise of this book is to teach women how they can use a form of magic that no one else really has access to. Guys can't do it, and how they can manipulate, as we kind of were talking earlier, the culture, and be able to use their mind and their intellect to shape everything else around them. So absolutely, a lot of these celebrities are occultists. They found ways to be able to use, whether they learned it themselves or their management or someone trained them how to do it, and whether they even realize it's magic, that, as we talked about earlier, they're using forms to sway the winds of change, and that's very powerful, and it's everywhere. That is the age that we're in, and like you said, this is the face of occultism now. This is really where it's at. I mean, we can be purist grimoirists, and want to go back to the 600-year-old method, or say that, you know what, give it another 100 years, most of that's going to be gone. There's always going to be people that want to go back in time and be the historians, absolutely. But not as many anymore. It has revived. The grimoire renaissance happened about 15 years ago, and it's been happening ever since. There's 1 million books now. But as you see, a lot of it now is UPG. It's not based on these old doctrines. It's based on that practitioner's experience. That's what a lot of magic books are now. Jason's talked about that. He's expressed that pretty heavily in his courses. That you have to kind of delineate between what is based on discernment and what is unverified personal gnosis. And, it's important. Either one's very important, but you're going to see a lot of that in modern day because people are coming up with their own methods to practice because it was so limited back then. You had one of a few paths. Now there's endless paths because with the advent of the internet, you can read 50 different paths at one time, which makes you an accumulation of everything you studied. But someone 400 years ago only knew about the magic that they had access to in the area that they were in. They never had access to African Brazilian magic and European magic and chaos magic and Golden Dawn magic and all these things at once to pretty much break down and make what their practice would be. And it makes us to be a very interesting time period and culture of occultism.
Yeah, 100%. And also, the people who are now, quote unquote, allowed to do magic because they finally have the time and the space, especially, I think, women who maybe in previous generations were so busy trying to take care of children and trying to, support, basically, like somebody had to do the cooking and cleaning. Somebody had to do that. Somebody had to do all that stuff and not get as well educated. And to be honest, a lot of occultism, it requires, especially when it comes to ceremonial magic, it is kind of like a heavy mental load to read all the grimoires and things like that. So the demographic is changing as well. And obviously, just the same way you wouldn't practice medicine the same on every single person, a diverse demographic is going to require diversity in terms of the medicine and the techniques and things. So for me, this is very natural that because the occult, especially like witchcraft, I think is a little bit different in that there was always like a stronger feminine feel to it perhaps, but the occult, especially ceremonial magic and things like that. And it sounds like you and I both, we have, a background in more ceremonial magic, is the fact that ceremonial magic was actually created for like a bunch of like dudes. Their career was to be like the rabbi, the spiritual leader, whatever, right? didn't have to worry about feeding the kids or like taking out the trash.
Exactly.
So then when you have like a bunch of especially young women today, or young, like genderqueer people coming in today, that's a whole different mindset, that's a whole different energy. How do you take something that was created for somebody who maybe was even your oppressor and claim it, reclaim it, remix it so that it works for you? And to me, that space between the old and the new, what's valuable about the old is that what I've noticed in my personal experience, there's a lot of great first principles that we can learn from old stuff. There's a reason why it endured. There was some sort of kernel of truth, sort of like when people are building bridges and you kind of know as an engineer, whether you're building a bridge in Antarctica or whether you're building a bridge in Africa or like North America, there's certain principles that kind of work on Earth. First principles. Same thing with these old magical techniques. You learn some first principles. My background in doing ceremonial magic, it has been invaluable because I learned first principles of basically how to hold energy, like I call it Churchill energy, when I'm working with entities that might be considered scary, like demons. So I go into a magic circle with an energy that I think that maybe younger occultists who haven't had that background in that sort of magic, they don't know that. So their results may not be the same as mine. But that's because I was able to go through the first principles and learn sort of the foundations of that. However, just because I have the first principles of that, there is a gap between the traditional, like awesome, but then there's this new stuff, this new sort of like strain coming in as well, because technology has changed everything. COVID especially accelerated the lockdowns. They accelerated the way that society has changed. Things are not the same anymore. In the span of 2 years, we've kind of crammed in what I think is almost like 50 years of like societal change in so many different ways. How can we do magic based upon, forget like 500 years ago, even 3 years ago? Very different world. Very different world. Is magic not supposed to be contextual? Is magic not supposed to be relevant to current life? Or are we going to do magic that worked great back when, like nobody even knew that germs existed? Are we going to do that? Or are we going to realize that even 3-4 years ago, the world was very different? Very different. We have an entire generation of children who like spent formative years at home instead of school socializing. They were on video games, playing like, just like whatever it is, going to virtual concerts, seeing Travis Scott in a video game rather than at like a stadium. We have an entire generation of kids all around the world, not just in the Western world, all around the world who went through that. How can we ignore that? These are kids who are going to be 25, 30 in the next couple of years. Are we going to ignore that? And I think to ignore it is actually anti-occultist thinking, because I think a really strong feeling of occultism to me is what Jack Grail has described as sort of like outlaw magic. Occultists, they were sort of operating at the fringes because it's like you can't get into the front door because you're not powerful, you're not this, you don't know the judge, whatever it is. The occultist is in the back alley ready to help you out. The outlaw, the slave, whoever else. We're ready to help you out. Well, if that's the case, then shouldn't we be looking at not just the people who are just in the mainstream or like at the power right now, but the up and coming, the fringes, the masses that are soon going to come into their power? To me, that's where the power of the occult is, not in the center, but at the edges that are going to descend to the center.
On the fringes, yeah, because they'll become the new center eventually. And I think people want to fight. People fight change because change, I guess, is scary. And what people are afraid of fear. As funny as that sounds, fear is the biggest deterrent for everybody. And, it's a made-up thing. We create our own fear. But I think people are so afraid of change that they'll fight it at every last turn until it's inevitable to just accept it and that it's coming. And as you said, one of the really crazy things is to think of all the COVID children who will be down the road, be the next generation of practitioners, the next generation of leaders of the world, and their remembrance of being a child was already in this world of technology, but was already in this world of tension, in this world of seclusion as well with technology. So it's going to be a really strange demographic for people to grow up to, but it's going to usher us into the next age. And that's where we are when the time shifted into the aeon of Aquarius. everything started changing. You know, the last so many years, a lot of stuff has already happened, as you said, in like a 3-year period. It was like the entire world took a evolutionary shift in some way, and anytime it shifts, there's going to be a lot of friction from the waves coming. And I think that's what we're seeing with all the tensions across the world, is it's consciousness shifting so quick and so rapidly that we're feeling the ripples from it. And the ripples are going to go for a while, and there's a lot more change coming. I think this is an evolutionary step into the new aeon. I really do believe that you know, AI, look at how quick AI has built over the last so many years. I mean, they've been working on it forever. But if you think about it, things like ChatGPT and all that didn't exist really to the general public a few years ago. And now it's here. Yeah, it's like within the last year. So like these programs, and when I said that, I mean like other programs like that as well. So like ChatGPT and all these other AIs out there, really within a 2-year span, opened up to the world. How weird is that right after COVID, right after this shift, right after all these other strange events that have happened, they're like, now AI is open to the public, take it. And it's writing books, it's writing albums, it's making art, it's changing very quickly a way that we look at life and we see it, the way that we process it. And I think that that's just another little bit of what's pushing us to what's to come. I mean, there is a change happening, and I think, as I said, it has to be accepted or people are going to be left behind.
And the occult can help us accept these scary things. That's one of the things that I really feel has helped me in my life. Because again, when I first started my witchy occult journey, I was not in a good place. And who I am now is very different. I'm far more open-minded. I'm far less anxious about the future. And I think the occult and occult rituals, even if, let's say, I had absolutely 0 results from any of the occult practices, and by the way, I only kept doing them because my results were compelling. But let's just say hypothetically, I didn't have any results. Even if I didn't have any results, they would have still been incredibly valuable because of who I changed into, which meant that it would be impossible not to have results. Because when you're a different person, you move through the world differently. The world treats you differently. Different life experiences come to you. So the occult helped me become, I believe, more of myself. And part of that is not exactly the negation of fear, but the surrender of how the world is, as you mentioned. You know, like the world is the way that it's going to be. It's like you don't control it, and yet you control yourself. You become surrendered to it. When I surrendered, and this was right at the beginning of the lockdowns. This was back in 2019 or so. Around 2019, when the lockdowns just began, I had just come back to America. I was like, this sucks. As soon as I landed in America, this is when Trump was still president. I was like, the air tastes bitter. You know, there was an anger in the air. It wasn't there when I left back in 2015, when Obama was still there, you know. But now Trump is here, and then it's just awful. And that's when the lockdowns happened. And at that time, I was like, okay, what's happening, right? What's happening? The world is changing, and it didn't take a genius, to be perfectly honest. It didn't take a crystal ball. It didn't take a tarot reading. It didn't take any of that for me to see that what was going to happen was TikTok was going to blow up. I could almost taste it. I think almost anybody who like watches that space in terms of like technology closely, sometimes they see things that seem prescient, but they're not. It's just more like it's pretty obvious. So I even wrote on Facebook. I said to everybody back in 2019, I said, everyone, I'm so for real. Get on TikTok. If you don't get on TikTok, you're going to be irrelevant. Get on it now. The amount of pushback that I got, the amount of sort of pearl clutching and being like, how dare you, you know? No, that's not possible. And I was just like, whatever. Like, I'm not going to say anything anymore. Now, what is it? Like, it's been 4 years since then.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, literally. Now people are just like, okay, I guess I should get on TikTok. And I'm just like, girl, if you had gone on TikTok 4 years ago, you could have had a platform that gives you far more options. Yep. Basically, far more avenues for your magic to go through. My platform on TikTok, I'm at about 500,000 followers on TikTok. The reason why is not because I'm good at it. It was truly first movers, you know, like it was because I came in at the time. And the thing is, I told everybody at the time, get on TikTok. I told them, and everybody was like, no, like they were above it. 4 years later, and it's just continuing. And there's a very good chance that by the end of this year, I'm going to be, over 500,000.
It's crazy when you think about it. I mean,
it's crazy. And I didn't deserve it. But the thing is, I got in at that time. It's that line from that movie. I totally forget, but Jeremy Irons says, and this is about the financial crisis. He says, listen, there's only 3 ways that you kind of win. You cheat, you're smarter than everyone else, or you're first. Now, I don't cheat. And while I think that there's a lot of smart people who work at this firm, we're not always the smartest. So what do? We move first.
Yep.
And to me, that's when I realized the reality of today is that the attention that you get, and it always starts with young people. The reason why people were shitting on TikTok is because they saw it as a platform of young teenage girls lip syncing. That's what Instagram used to be as well. Anytime, and this is a rule of thumb that I always say, if there's a platform that teenage girls are really into right now,
it's
get on
blow up.
Right away. It will blow up in the next 2-3 years. So everybody was just shitting on TikTok, and I was like, wait a second. Teenage girls are on it, loving it. I'm going to be on it, right? And here we are. And the thing is, TikTok is not slowing down. In fact, TikTok is expanding. It's going to keep expanding.
Well, I think it's I don't want to say the replacement because Facebook isn't going anywhere, but if you notice in our lifetime, I mean, MySpace came out, it was massive, not nowhere near what these companies are, but it was massive for that time, and it was the game changer. But then Facebook came out. I was one of the very early cats to get on Facebook. When I got on, there was no one on. It was just after the phase where it was for schools specifically, and it got open to the public. I was one of the first public people to get on there. And then you look where it come now, and you look at it and you're like, wow, what a huge thing that blew MySpace out of the water. And you see these other ones try to compete, and Instagram's a big one, but as you said, Instagram started out as teenage girls on there and just face models where you never seen their body, it was just their head, and that's all you seen constantly, and then it blew up to a big platform. But everybody waited for a long time for who was going to be Facebook's contender, who was really going to be Facebook's contender, and people still even kind of talk about that, not realizing it's already been here, and it is TikTok, and it's going to blow up and be every bit as big, if not bigger, than Facebook, because even our attention span as a culture, as people, has shortened. So small videos is it. That is, we don't want to watch a 45-minute video. We don't want to watch a 50. People want to watch something that they can digest in 60 to 90 seconds and be like, oh, cool, next one, because as much as people hate that, and that gets that pushback that we talked about, that's where we at. We want to digest as much as we can, as quick as we can, just like the machines. We want to because we want to get through it, we want to learn, we want to see, we want to experience, we want to digest. And people look at that as wrong, but I look at that as us expanding. I mean, we are trying to continue to expand what we can expand.
It is what it is, and that's what I think that a lot of people, even in the occult, you would think that if you're an occultist, you've learned to surrender to these mysterious forces. So to me, it's only natural that an occultist also realizes that this is a zeitgeist that is sort of like an invisible hand that is beyond us, right? So it's sort of like, okay, are you going to ride with that invisible hand? Are you going to ride it and see how far you can go? And are you going to use the tools at your disposal? The occult, in so many ways, occultists, witches, are in a position to ride the wave in a more graceful, elegant, luxurious, happy way than the average person. All the tools were lined up there for an occultist to do really well with this invisible hand. Or are you going to try to resist it and be the surfer who gets smacked down, right? Or gets smacked down to the bottom of the ocean? Because that's what it really is. And as you've said so many times, it is just the way that the world is moving. And the occult and magic, from what I see it historically, is a way for the bandits, the outlaws, the fringe, to be able to ride the wave without having to kind of like sell their soul if they don't want to. And so it's like perfect. We're in a situation right now where the fringes are actually being rewarded. Like these little niche communities, hashtag witch talk, whatever. They're rewarded. You're literally rewarded for being the fringe. And so if only the occultist and the witch can sort of like realize that you're going to be okay if you rely upon all of the great principles, the first principles that magic has taught you about how to be in your own energy, how to alchemize whatever sort of anxiety or emotions you have, realizing that the fear that you have, you can do banishing spells. You can use that as rocket fuel for something else. I mean, witches and occultists are supposed to be naturals at social media. I believe that, you know, like John Dee, he would have been like the ultimate social media master. I believe that like all these like mages of yore would have just killed it on TikTok. He would have just fucking killed it.
Just imagine that. It's a funny thing to think about. You know, you got John Dee, you got like Lephis Levy and Manly Hall over there just typing away, slaughtering the posts.
I think they would have 100%. Like they would have, because they would have realized, holy shit, this is literal magic. This is literal, an avenue of literal magic. I am fucking riding that. I am riding it. And so I'm just like, yeah, I believe that they would have totally been all about it. And so I'm just like, okay, to me, as far as I'm concerned, riding technology, riding the social media wave is occult AF. You know, it is witchcraft AF. And so for me, I have absolutely no resistance to it. And I think the fact that I didn't have resistance to it, and now 4 years later, I feel almost like it's good that I didn't have resistance, because the occult that I do, the magic that I do, is so facilitated by this technology. To me, it shows me that they mesh well together, so well together. And that's why I devote an entire section in my book to cutting edge technology like AI, ChatGPT, to blockchain technology, to all of that. I literally, and if you go on Goodreads, you know, sometimes I go on Goodreads to see what people say. Man, the people who leave comments, they're always the ones who say, oh, I can't believe you talked about technology. You know, and I'm like, oh, boring, you know? But the thing is that people get really upset because they're just like, how can you talk about technology?
It's a touchy subject. I had one of our episodes where we brought up AI towards the beginning of the season. I think it was episode 2. And there was a guy who was following me at that time. I don't know him. He just started following me a few weeks prior, but he was like real into my stuff. And then all of a sudden we talked about AI, and the dude lost it in the comments, started talking all kinds of shit, and then was like, I'm out. And like, vanished. And that was a touchy subject for him, because he dropped that same old bullshit that I am, what did he say? I'm an eclectic practitioner or something along those lines. I'm like, that's great. You're talking shit because we maybe are not an eclectic. I just don't understand that. Like, practice you. I'm not telling you what to practice. We're talking about what is here now, whether you want to face it or not. It's here. You don't have to practice that way. You don't have to accept it. But it's still here at your doorstep, so you might as well at least pay attention to it. Now, I'm not fully for a lot of the stuff that's happening these days with social media and the things. There's times I've bitched about it and not liked it, but I also am a realist and understand that, you know, this is the age we're in, so we got to kind of adapt to it, as I mentioned. Now, with that being said, obviously you put out a wonderful book, and, you know, have done well in that regard. What's next? I mean, as you said, you weren't originally planning on becoming a cultist, let alone becoming an author. So what do you see on the horizon for you of what's in future projects?
Ooh, well, in a lot of ways, I don't really make these like really big plans. So it's sort of like, let's see what happens.
Okay.
But in general, I would say there's a lot of movement happening in the world of publishing, just general publishing, in the world of just all of that. Basically, Book Talk and also YouTube as well, they really influence sales of books just in general. Like, they literally create the bestsellers list and everything. And because of that, the publishing industry is completely changing. It is topsy-turvied like hell. And for me, I am trying to see what I can do, because my experience in the publishing of this book, what it's led me to believe is that this is an important thing, to write books, because people want to hold something. They want to actually have books and stuff. They want information. But again, information is a commodity. How do we make it so that we curate information? Books are a curation of information. You leave out some information and you put in some information in books. So to me, I'm following the publishing industry very closely. I'm following the technology industry very closely, like AI. and I'm just riding the wave to that. But in general, I would say that anything that deals with social media, magical platforms where you can give out, whether it's information, curation, propaganda, whatever you choose through your own true will, those are the places I'm also taking a very close look at. So that's my answer.
No, I like it. That's both in very important routes. I love the fact that you want to stay with publishing as well. I mean, as you said, holding something tangible in your hand. I will read ebooks, and I like ebooks. They're great. They're convenient for when you're on a plane or something like that. And you don't want to be carrying around stuff around. You can just read it on your tablet or read it on your phone. And as you said, I love audiobooks. I'm someone who listens to audiobooks when I drive. I drive a ton. So I pop them on while I'm driving instead of listening to music, and I learn while I drive. And then when I'm not doing that, I read physical books. But my favorite thing is to have that physical book. And when we move to an age where things are becoming more paperless and more digital, instead of taking away from the books, I think it's added to it. That's why people want to get their hand on it more, because they're like, I don't have to hold school books anymore. We have a computer, we have a tablet. You start to get to this age where you don't get to hold that book. So when you hold a beautiful book like the one you had written, and you hold that in your hands, it's like, oh, I feel the energy from it because it can't be taken away. There's always going to be that demand. And, with yours, what I really liked is how you did the layout of the patterns of the words, the patterns of the sentences, the color schemes, how you use the 3 different stages of the alchemical process. The artist absolutely dominated in your book. Whoever your artist is, fantastic.
Spring Demetrio killed it.
Killed it, yeah. I mean, I love how, from the chapters, the fire, the wood, the metal, how you did that. And, as you see right there, the spiral, how you used your words in the layout and theme of the book was very original. And I got to be honest with you, as someone, as I said, who collects a lot of occult books, that was something when I seen, I'm like, I really was happy that you did that. That is a beautiful way of presenting a book. And I look forward to adding it to it's actually in my Amazon cart right now. I just hadn't bought it yet. I was looking at it the other night. I'm like, I need to add it. I haven't pulled the trigger because I really want to fucking read it. And I'm like, oh, because then you have to move everything else around. So it's going to happen. It's just, I wish I could spawn 4 of me to read all full time, 24/7.
I feel ya. I will say that book, House of Leaves, for all those who have read that book, it's been fiction books, it's been art, culture, the Matrix movies, decidedly non-magical things that have influenced this magical book. So in a lot of ways, as we are talking maybe about perhaps things that an occultist can do to help their magical practice along, for me, I would say it's important that we are truly in touch, with art, culture, movies, books, what's going on YouTube, even celebrity gossip, just the intake of information and the curation of that information that we file within ourselves, and to seek out curators outside of ourselves that we also trust. Being a good curator, Frater, I think that a lot of people listen to your podcast because the guests that you have and the conversations you have is a type of curation as well. So that's what people are doing. They're tuning in because they want that curation, because they can't be everywhere at once.
Yep.
So they need somebody to help them decide what's important to pay attention to. So because of that, I think that when you have art and culture and technology, and even learning about the Barbie movie, watching it, enjoying it, and things like that, and you become a person in the society without becoming totally part of the society, to me, that's the witchiest liminal place to be, where you can just be love the Barbie movie, but I'm going to go and use some menstrual blood and do some magic.
Yep.
You
have to be able to do that. It's like a costume that you can choose to put on and wear when you need to, and take off when you don't want or need it. And that is how you play the world. I mean, you should be the director. That is magic, as you said. You are the conductor of your reality. And I can slip into culture and watch the movies and read the books and have the conversations and be a part of the social media, or I can slip back out of it and be in the woods at night naked in front of a fire dancing. You have to have both of those parts. You don't have to, but you should, especially if you're in our kind of path. So,
that's the joy of being human. That's the joy of being human.
Exactly.
And isn't that what being a witch is? A witch is your birthright. It is literally the birthright of every single Homo sapien born on this planet to be a witch. You were born to be a witch. It was stripped away from you. Or should I say it was painted on top of so that you forgot it. But it's strip away that paint. That is your birthright to do both. To be in this world but not of this world. Every human being has that access. And to me, radical deconditioning is best done through things like the occult, like psychology modalities like IFS, through psychedelics, plant medicine. There's so many avenues. It doesn't just have to be called magic, because there's so many things that we don't call magic that are magic, but they're all kind of in that same suit. So ultimately, I think as long as we realize we were born to do this, we were born to just be like, yeah, it's great being human. Love it. Love this roller coaster ride. Shit, I gotta die soon? Fuck, okay, I hope I come back again. That sort of joie de vivre, I think that is what makes an occultist and witch different from somebody who's deeply conditioned, a rat in society, And witchcraft and the occult, I keep talking about in my TikToks, is the ultimate deconditioning key to get you out of that race. It's like, get out of the labyrinth, girl, get out. Here's the key. There's the door. Turn the key, get the fuck out, right? And so for me, it's just sort of like talking to you and having people make comments on the side and just talking to other people. It's sort of like, they may not do it the way that I do or you do. They may not work with demons, and yet they're doing art. They're going into culture. They're cooking for their families and creating great meals, whatever it is. That's magic too, and that's all they need to do. It doesn't have to be the way that we do it, but it's all magic anyways.
I agree, and that's a very strong point. I always told everybody, do what resonates with you, and I won't judge you or try to talk you into anything else, because that's your path, and it should be very unique to each and every person, whether that is just art, whether that's writing, whether that is standing in a ritual robe in the middle of a circle. Whatever allows you to work your magic in this reality, we should all do that to make the best lives for ourselves, and by doing so, usually the best lives overall as a culture. So I love that. And folks, if you resonate with that, let us know. We had some comments coming in. I didn't read them all because we're having a deep conversation here. I wasn't reading the last few. Great point about the access to magic around the globe. Yeah, it definitely has changed some things by having so much access to so many things at once, but it's the next step, as we talked about. Someone else said, great point about having all the... Oh, no. Hold on. Coming in late. It popped up and moved my list down. Coming in late, but looking forward to watching the replay. Absolutely, Tim. Check out the replay. We had some fun talking about some very good topics this evening, and I'm sure you'll like that. I guess I would ask you if you could give... it sounds cliche to ask that, but if you could give someone advice coming in, I know we kind of touched some of those bases tonight, but if someone day one's discovering the show right now, and then listening and all of a sudden is intrigued and said, well, wow, I want to kind of start this path, what would you tell them, knowing that they are kind of in it in a technological phase where when we started we weren't? What would you suggest? Do they go old and learn old ways first and move up to modern day, or do they completely abandon old ways and start new? What would you suggest as a beginner or a neophyte?
Oh my God. I guess it depends on the person, but in general, I think a very safe way to start, which is kind of across the board, a great place to start, would be ancestral magic. And ancestral magic is rooted in tradition. And ancestral magic doesn't necessarily just have to be your bloodline. I interviewed Mallory Vaudoise on my YouTube channel a couple years back, and she wrote a book about ancestral veneration. And basically was talking about how you can also have cultural ancestors. A lot of people are influenced by David Bowie. David Bowie may be part of your ancestral list, your ancestral tree as well. So I think ancestral magic is a great place. I think that everyone should start by getting a couple of really good astrology readings and human design readings, because it's going to help you kind of accelerate, because as Stephen Forrest says in his books, The Inner Sky, and his other books, yeah, you could have a really torrid love affair for 10 years, or you can get an astrology reading. They're both going to lead you to the same place, but one takes 10 years, and the other takes an hour. So I'm just like, yeah, 1 hour, please, So that's why I recommend really several, like a traditional astrology reading, a modern astrology reading, a Vedic astrology reading, a human design reading. I think they're money well worth spending, because it's going to help you sort of all the different paths, it's going to help you sort of clarify which path is most constructive. And then try that for a little bit, and then see what works for you. Some people, they need to start out with that love and light stuff. They really do. Some people need to start out immediately with the occult stuff. If they don't start out with the occult stuff, they get bored and they'll just abandon magic. Some people will never go into magic, and instead they're going to love reading about shadow work and psychology stuff. So it really depends, which is why I think astrology and human design readings are going to be very helpful, because it's going to help you figure out, oh, I'm a little bit, and I totally resonate with the fact that maybe I'm more meant to do lots of deep internal family system psychology stuff rather than working with the Goetia. So I would say start with that and see what happens a year or two after you do that. But that's more than enough to keep you busy for at least a year or two.
That's a good start. No, it's a very good start. And after this first couple of years, you'll see the difference from where you started to where you are, and from there be able to kind of direct that train in what path you want to go to. But that'd be a good beginning to get to know yourself a little bit, which is the beginning of all magic, is starting to learn who you are, not who you think you are. And then the rest unfolds afterwards. So, no, I want to thank you so much for coming on this evening. Folks, if you didn't hear me stop this evening to take a commercial break to play the sponsors, it's because I just chose not to, because we were shooting the breeze. So check out our sponsors at the beginning, as we talked about. They get a lot of spotlight. I'll make sure I throw a post up for all of them. But we're going to get ready to wrap up the evening. One thing I did want to ask is, on your Witches and Wine podcast on YouTube, you recently put the first interview out in, I think, the last year, and it was a great one. I loved that interview. It was really good. With a Gore, what was the last name? Gore Fur? Gore Pierre. Okay, I knew something like that off the top of my head. Great interview. I really was enjoying listening to him. Do we expect some more interviews coming up soon? I know that you had a ton in the past. There was a little bit of a break probably to write the book and some other things you were working on. And then I know in the last 2 months that came up, and I was like, oh, all right. So do we expect to see any other great interviews from you?
Yes, I have many interviews in my queue. Again, I do things based upon the pulse of do I have the energy to do it now, or do I want to do it later? So some of these interviews they were recorded years back, including a very special interview that I still have to put up, which I did with the late Jake Stratton-Kent.
Jake Stratton-Kent. So, I knew as soon as you said that, or you said an interview that near and dear to my heart, I knew you were going to say that for some reason. I really want to hear that whenever you get the chance to put that out. I was a big fan of Jake Stratton-Kent's work.
Notorious Jake Stratton-Kent. So that's from actually a few years back, but I still haven't put up a lot of these interviews yet. I'm also going to start a new YouTube channel just for human design, which is kind of like the sister of astrology, but it's like a very modern. It was developed back in 1988 or 1989.
Okay.
So starting a new thing like that. But yeah, I really hope to get these videos from 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's actually, to be perfectly honest, it's a miracle that these people are still talking to me, because I interviewed them 4 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'll get it up someday. But the pulse hasn't been there, but now I feel as though the pulse is slowly starting to come back, and hopefully by the end of this year, I'll have most of the queue put up.
Okay.
I have 20 videos, by the way.
That's awesome. No, I mean, sometimes it's hard to get it all out. I was a musician for many years, and we, wrote a lot of music and didn't release all my music. And there's some music, I have 2 albums worth of music that's just never been released. And it's not that it's not great music. It is great music. I just never got around to finishing it. And people be like, when are you going to? Just as you said, whenever the mood's right, if the mood's right, it'll come out. If it's not, then it'll stay hidden in the vault forever. But sometimes as you're an artistic mind and a busybody as myself, it's hard to get all of the things you want done in the short amount of time we have. So you get what we can give you, folks. That's all we can do.
Exactly. You get it.
Absolutely. Well, other than that, any last closing statements?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's kind of it's such a great thing that we were finally able to meet and talk. So I'm just very thankful that we had this really great conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very excited to have you on the show. Like I said, it was great to rediscover your work again in the funny way that it happened, and to get you on the show and to get to chit-chat back and forth. I love meeting new people, love talking occultism, esotericism, and we certainly got to do that tonight and in many different ways I didn't even expect with the AI and the advanced technology, but I love that. That's, like I said, something we've talked about a couple times briefly on the show this year when we got to dive into it a little bit deeper. So thank you, and I look forward to any works that you release. I will be picking up the book. Like I said, folks, if you're out there, make sure you pick that book up. It is called Spellbound. It is gorgeous. You'll be happy to add it to your shelf. She's showing it off right there. Has a beautiful orange cover on it. And make sure you check out on YouTube Witches and Wine and listen to some of her past episodes. Keep an eye on all future projects and just support her in everything she does. Other than that, catch us in 2 weeks. We're soon to kick off our other radio show for Season 4, too, coming up, guys, next month. So a few weeks away from that, I think 4, and we got a lot more material coming your way. So other than that, that is it for me this evening. You guys have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. We'll catch you next time.